Midwicket Podcast, zoom it up, that's right. And it's on the mic, a picture day and night. Bouncing on his beat as we shine so bright. Pick it all around, believe the hype.
Hello and how good is cricket? Welcome to the Midwicket Podcast. My name is Sunny and I am really excited for a wrap up of the first Perth Test in the Border-Gavaskar series for 24 and 25. Firstly, before we get into the show, I just wanted to give a shout out to the socials as well as to YouTube. Firstly, I want to say thank you to all of you for listening to this show, following it, giving me feedback, giving advice. Thank you for the emails. If you could do me all a big favor and just on YouTube, if you can hit subscribe, as well as on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, if you just follow the show, you'll be doing me a massive favor. It's all to do with algorithms and who gets access or who can see us on the feed. So if you could do that, that would be great. Today, we've got a massive show, very exciting. We're going to wrap up the Perth Test, and I've got a very special guest with me. I've got Prasanna. Prasanna, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sunny. It's a privilege and honor to be here. We obviously run two different podcasts, but it is an absolute privilege to be part of your show and wishing your show all the best.
Prasanna, you put a shockwave through all of YouTube with your moustache. You're obviously doing a thing for Movember. It's a great cause. Do donate to the cause. Prasanna has been an incredible help for me in starting up the Midwicket Podcast. He's currently the host of the Common Fan podcast, and all of you should definitely go and check it out. It's on YouTube. It's on all your podcast feeds as well. It's a fantastic show. I'd certainly suggest that you will jump on too. Prasanna, can you quickly tell me about how you got that podcast going?
So it was funny. It was about, I think it was the weekend before the Cricket World Cup, and a bunch of my friends. And it was the October long weekend here in Australia, right? So we all went to Bowral. I went to Bowral, obviously the birthplace of the Don himself. Prostrated in front of his statue and said maybe India could win. That evening, one of my friends, Ritvik Shekhar, as you know, called me up and said, hey, let's do a podcast. And then one thing led to another, and another friend of mine, Mr. Vijay Narayan Rangarajan, who is another friend, but also a fantastic singer and a musician and a music composer, he also got in. And then we shot the first episode, and then within the second episode, we had another colleague of mine, Manan Puri. He came in. We had Pradeep Latsa. We've got a bunch of people, and as they say, the rest is history. And we've had an amazing amount of time, an amazing amount of fun doing the podcast.
It is so much fun doing a podcast, especially about a subject that we love so much. There are so many fans out there, and if you are listening to this show and you'd like to be a fan on this show as well, please jump on. I know being a fan and having a bunch of mates, starting a podcast is always on the back of your mind. So, Prasanna, I just wanted to thank you for helping me getting this show started, and I'm so excited to talk about this test match. And
you mentioned that funnily enough, sorry to interrupt, Sunny. I was going to say, today marks 10 years to the day that unfortunately Phil Hughes passed away. And I remember Michael Clarke delivering a wonderful eulogy around this time 10 years ago. And he talked about how Phil Hughes in the middle of the pitch would say, where else would you be rather than playing cricket for your country? Now, we're obviously not at that level at all, but where else would you be rather than talking about cricket and what makes you passionate about it, eh?
100%. And I can't wait to chat about cricket with you. And obviously, deep sadness that we remember Phil Hughes, who passed away at such a young age, doing and playing a sport that we all love. Let's shift the tone of this talk for the moment, and let's talk about this first test match, Perth. 4 days, that's all it took for India to absolutely demolish the Australian cricket team. Very, very unexpected. 295 runs was the margin. They go 1-0 up in the first time that this is a 5-match test series. It's at a venue that Australia have never lost before. India had so many questions that were posed to them, and I feel like they answered so many of them. India's gotten off to the perfect start. Prasanna, how do you feel about this win?
I think it's exhilarating, really. Just the one thing. So, Sunny, remember the 2008 Test series? India won that test in the Wacker. That was one of the first few wins at the WACA. So this is their first win at the Optus Stadium. Now, feelings is just unexplainable. It's exhilarating, fantastic. Start from the top. Mr. Jaiswal himself, we've heard about the stories and his rags to riches tale. But, what a fantastic technical cricket player as well. Front foot, back foot, all these shots. Can't say anything. And then the king is back. Now, depending upon other people, some people call Virat Kohli the king, other people call Jasprit Bumrah as the king, but there is the GOAT, there is the king, and there is Jaiswal. And I think all three of them combined in this wonderful medley. One would say in the music tradition, a jugalbandi, a meeting of the minds of sorts, and it was just fantastic. As you can see, I'm lost for words even now.
There has been so much pain for Indian cricket fans, especially against Australia, especially on the big stage in series or in matches where there has been so much expectation prior to the game, going as far back as 2003 in South Africa, and so many moments since then. So when the going is good, I think the Indian cricket fan is certainly up and about and enjoying it. And for certainly people like you and me who've grown up in Australia and having to cop the criticisms of everyone around us, this is one rare opportunity where we can maybe give it back just a little bit. Well,
I was going to say, Sunny, I've told some of my friends, maybe it's unfair for Australia to play against such nations. Maybe Australia should start working from the bottom up, a tour of Ireland, a tour of Scotland, a one-off test between Ireland, Scotland. If they get better, maybe the West Indies, considering they lost to the West Indies last time. And then once they get to that level, then they can start thinking about countries like India. But let's see if this is famous last words.
Well, 100%. Cricket, if anything, is a very humbling sport. So maybe your comments won't age very well. But let's see. Why don't we start at the very beginning of this test match, right to the toss of at the toss, sorry. Bumrah's won the toss and he's revealed his team and he's said that there's no Jaddu, there's no Ravichandran Ashwin, and they've decided that Rana is going to be the third fast bowling option. Having the benefit of hindsight, that was genius. But what were your thoughts then?
It was interesting to say the least. The interesting factor is Nathan Lyon averages better than all the other fast bowlers at Optus Stadium, right? I think that Lyon's average, not after this game, but before this game, was I think 17 or something like that. So it was interesting. That being said, Optus, the WACA, it's a fast pitch, it's a spicy pitch. Bumrah also said, it's played a bit truer this time around than last time. So I wasn't too surprised that Jaddu and Ashwin were not selected. But definitely Rana ahead of Prasanna Krishna. Look, it's one of those things. I think it in the end comes down to what was done, which was a captain's call. But it was that was the only question I had, Rana ahead of Prasanna Krishna. But it's a question that is now moot.
That's right. That's right. And I guess it'll bode well we'll think about what further selections they'll make in future test matches, and we might come to that in future shows. You're right, with the benefit of hindsight, it's all a bit moot at the moment. Washington Sundar, who came in as the spinner, was admirable, and his performances with the bat were maybe a bit more reassuring than Jaddu or Ashwin might have presented. Washi had that beautiful look-away six at the Gabba last time, and maybe it was on that memory they've decided to select him for this game in the opening match of the series. The match got underway and India got bowled out about 2 sessions. They got bowled out for 150. Australia looked incredible. Their fast bowling options were causing a lot of plays and misses. They got their wickets when they needed to. They fielded really well. There was that excellent catch that Marnus Labuschagne took off a rebound from McSweeney in the slips. Australia was in their pomp. The drum beats were beating and they were marching towards the start of their summer, and it looked very ominous for India. What were you thinking when India was going through this batting collapse?
Day 6 of the India-New Zealand test, basically. In hindsight, if India had batted until 250, I think we would have had a different story this series. I think Australia would have still won if India had gotten out at 250. Hindsight, once again, India getting out for 150 was great. But, some of the shots that we played, highly attacking, you have to give respect to the bowler. Something both of us have been park cricket bowlers. You obviously had greater success than me. But the one thing about cricket is you have to give respect to the bowler. At one point in time, we were attacking. We were just plonking the front foot and slogging to cow, or thinking of wanting to do that. The Australian bowlers are not knobs. I mean, they are world-class bowlers. You have to have that respect. And the pitch was doing quite a bit, right? It was doing quite a bit. And, I'd gone to get a coffee and come back and there was already 2 wickets gone. It wasn't meant to be how Test cricket was being played. And that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. And the attacking shots might have been the difference. In fact, Pant and Reddy's partnership was about 48 runs, which was the difference between the two teams at the end of the first innings for both teams. So it was their attacking nature and their flair that really allowed the batting team on difficult conditions to get to the total that they did. Australia, however, played a bit more of a defensive approach to their batting, and they got bundled out for 104 or so.
Well, that's the next question, right, Sunny? And this is where I think the Australian selectors are really going to have to think about it. Your best batter in the team has to be at number 3. Is Marnus the best batter in the Australian cricket team? Probably not. You've sent a person who's never opened before as an opener after the disastrous Stephen Smith failure, right? So that right there and then you've got 3 gone. India is always going to be the kind of team, regardless of where you're playing in Perth, Penrith, or Pondicherry, that if they smell blood, they will go for it. They are a pack. The Indian team, that's why they won in 2020. That's why they've been very competitive, right? They will hunt as a pack when they get the chance. Your top 3 is gone. Top 3, top 4 is gone. Stephen Smith couldn't even buy a run, right? So that's the question, and that's where I think the Australian team, when they started playing defensively, the mindset went from let's score a run to let's not get out. And as you and I know, Sonny, in our playing days, or I'm assuming you're still playing, I've given the hat up for a bit. If you keep thinking of wanting to survive, there's going to be a ball with your name on it. If you keep thinking of let's try and score a run, I think you'll do a lot better. And I think that's the difference between the Indian team and the Australian team.
And that's fair enough too. And certainly as a fan, it's certainly a lot more fun watching attacking play rather than defensive prods, unless you're an Indian fan and you're watching wickets tumble at the other end, of course. Bumrah in the shadows of Perth was ridiculous. His spell at the close of day 1 was ridiculous. The crowd were certainly chanting Bumrah's name, and after a while, the Australian supporters who were around were also chanting Bumrah's name and just had to stand and applaud at what a remarkable spell of bowling it was. He'd had 4 wickets by the close of play on day 1 and got his 5th very early on day 2. Prasanna, how good is Jasprit Bumrah?
I think don't go by what I say, go by what Glenn Maxwell says. Earlier on, I think Glenn Maxwell was recording a podcast with one of our competitors, the great cricketer, and he mentioned how it's difficult to pick his bowling, whether he's bowling the bouncer or the 4-1. It's difficult to pick his bowling, and this is Maxwell, who hits 6s on one leg, right? That's how good he is. And Maxwell finished off by saying, I think Jasprit Bumrah will be going in history as the fastest bowler of this generation or potentially all time. Not with regards to the wickets and things like that, but definitely in terms of his sheer skill. I was lucky, Sunny, to see Jasprit Bumrah when he made his debut in a 2020 match in Adelaide. I think that was his first game, India versus Australia. So I was very lucky to see him perform then. He had a bit of an off 2020 game that game. I must say, I was like, wow, the action, the bowling, it was a bit iffy, but oh my God, I definitely apologize and eat my words for that. He is probably an amazing, amazing player and one of the best to have been produced by India.
Yeah. He was adequately supported as well by Rana and Siraj. I don't think Washington Sundar needed to bowl much at all. Reddy certainly got in there and took a couple of good wickets too. What do you think about this supporting act for Bumrah in those three? And if Shami is fit or maybe in another pitch, do you think there's room for other fast bowlers for the Indian team in this series?
It's a very good question, Sunny. And the reason I say that is because I know you said the supporting act of Siraj and Rana, but to be fair, Siraj hasn't bowled that well in recent times, right? He really hasn't bowled that well. Great innings in last test, second innings, very good bowling. But if Shami was going to be fit, I'd probably take Shami over Rana. Oh, sorry, Shami over Siraj, honestly speaking, because Siraj's bowling hasn't been to that level that we've expected. And I mean, his best bowling was in that 2020-2021 Test series. I reckon is one of his best. But that's my opinion. I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for that, and maybe I'll bump up your channel's views, but that's my opinion.
No, that's good. The second innings started, and what we saw on day 2 and then flowed on into day 3 was also something incredible and something that Indian fans will remember for a long time. We've already brought up his name, Yashasvi Jaiswal. And then on day 3 was the king himself in Virat Kohli scoring 100 as well. Who would you rather pay to watch if the test match is tomorrow between Jaiswal and Kohli?
Who would I rather pay to watch? Jaiswal. I reckon I'd pay to watch Jaiswal. Why? Because I've seen Virat Kohli get his first ever Test century. So I've been there, done that. No. I was just looking at this. I don't know if it's the right word. The juxtaposition of where we as Indian fans were and where we are now. Right. Previously, 2012, 2013, and 2012 series. Right. We had Michael Clarke bat and bat and bat and bat. And we used to always keep saying, you get Hayden out, you get Ponting in, you get Ponting out, you get Steve Waugh in. By the time until you get number 7, they've probably hit like 400. I'm assuming the Australian cricket followers thought the same. You get Jaiswal out, who's batting at 100 odd, then you get Kohli in, and the pitch has eased up, so he's now going to score runs for fun. Then you get Kohli out, and then you've got Rishabh Pant, who's a bit of bam bam, thank you, ma'am. And then, where do you go from there? Very soon you'll go from, 100 for 2 to 200 for 3 or 200 for 4 even. So, it was a magical, magical feeling. And more than that, the shots that Yashasvi played, very technically brilliant. It's some of his shots were taken from a test manual, apart from the one where, tried to do the 6 over third man, whichever went to fine leg. But that's the modern game. I mean, when was the first time someone played a sweep shot in a test match? It's just one of those things. But I think everyone who keeps saying that 2020 will cause the downfall of tests is probably forgetting the technique of test matches draws its inspiration nowadays a lot from 2020.
As in 2020 cricket, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Test match cricket has drastically changed in the way that it is played, isn't it? It's far more attacking. Even if there are flatter pitches, teams are playing more aggressively. They're trying to be attacking with their bowling fields and certainly with their batting. And Jaiswal is going to be a talisman for the future and really be someone that'll hold the flag and run it for the future for Test cricket, especially as a youngster, showing his bravery and attacking style of play, as you've mentioned. So it'll be certainly interesting to watch how his career blossoms going into the future. Very exciting.
Of course. Very exciting indeed.
Now, the Australian cricket team, you've already alluded to some things that have been the downfall for them so far, and maybe some issues that are going to arise. I know a lot of commentators have already put their few cents in to what might be the downfall of Australian cricket. And certainly what I saw in this test match, there were some worrying signs. It is not very Australian to field poorly. And although they did well in that first innings, that second innings, they'd let a lot of these half chances go. That was not something that you see very commonly for Australian teams. We saw some suspect batting against good fast bowling, and usually visiting fast bowling attacks don't do so well, especially on Australian soil. of late, that hasn't been the case. We saw Shamar Joseph do so well, and then the Indian bowling attack in the last series, and it's come up again in this series. But the thing that worries me the most is Australia's use of part-time bowlers, and then they've used this negative leg side tactic, which was just yuck, to be honest. It was so un-Australian. And then we heard Josh Hazlewood in this press conference, when asked specifically about, what the tactics were and what he thought, he just said, I just asked the batters about it, and almost seemed to raise a divide between the bowling and batting teams. This is not the Australian team that we're used to. And I feel like that means that the true Australian team is going to come out to play in the next few games. What do you think?
I don't know how true that second part of the statement is. We don't know. But I do agree with you on many of those things, right? The first, let's talk about the easy one first. The part-timers and the negative bowling. I don't think the negative bowling was an actual tactic. I think the negative bowling was actually lack of skill. Right. So it's, don't blame something on malice when you can blame it on incompetency. Marnus Labuschagne is not a good part-time bowler. Marnus Labuschagne is the guy that we get in park cricket that, you've got 2 or 3 overs before drinks. You don't want to use your attack bowlers. You get the bloke that's smoking the cigar and said, hey, you want to put one over. And that's the kind of bloke Marnus Labuschagne's bowling is, sorry to say. Okay, he goes from medium pace to spin to medium pace again, bowls wides, negative lines. I mean, this is, and I think this is once again coming back to your earlier question, which is lack of strategy. Did Pat Cummins think that him, Lyon, Stark, Hazlewood was good enough, and therefore we would never need to use Marnus Labuschagne? To be fair, I would rather rate Steve Smith as a better bowler than Marnus Labuschagne, because let's remember, Steve Smith came into the Australian side as a bowler, right?
He was the next Shane Warne, wasn't he?
It was Xavier Doherty was, I thought, the next Shane Warne.
They've been good with them, haven't they?
yeah, exactly. Remember that name? But that's very surprising, right? It was almost as if Australia never had a plan B if all your plan A bowlers are getting tonked. And whereas in India, we've got 6 good bowlers. Washington Sundar is a bowler. We've got our top 5. We've got 4, Washington Sundar and a couple of other part-timers that could probably roll their arm over if needed. But that was the key. And good fast bowling, you can only get good fast bowling if you keep practicing or if you keep playing. As much as I'd like to think that, Pat Cummins was okay missing a 2020. I don't care if he missed the 2020. But this comes down once again now to the scheduling thing that we need to talk about is for the next 6 weeks, I think, Sunny, there's not going to be any Shield cricket. The Australian fast bowlers missed a Shield cricket game. Pat Cummins said he'd prefer to be underdone. That is very un-Australian to use that phrase, to say, I'd prefer to be underdone. Some years ago at the Ashes, I think Stuart Broad or Jimmy Anderson admitted that they only bowled 20 or 30 overs before the Australian Ashes series, and the Australian commentators went ballistic at them, right? Because you need to bowl at least, they said, Freddie Truman said 1,000 overs or something like that. But it's the same thing now. You cannot come into a 5-test series being underdone. You have to be ready to give it your best shot on ball 1, because ball 2 might be a completely different story.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of worry about breaking down in the future, so they're also preserving themselves in the present. But that's played in the present, and that means that they're relying on their part-time Travis Head and Marnus Labuschagne to take up overs. That's
exactly right. Because who's waiting in the wings? Okay, Sean Abbott, yes. Who's waiting in the wings?
Boland,
Mitchell Starks, yeah. Build him a statue. Scott Boland. But Mitchell Stark's not getting any younger. He's probably on his last legs. Hazelwood's probably going to be on his last legs very soon. Cummins isn't getting any younger either. Why not try a Boland? Why not try that? And if that means that one of your fast bowlers has to sit out, so be it. Get prepared. If Hazelwood Scotty Boland, the bloke needs a statue at the MCG, right? Why are we saying that we need to preserve these people in cotton wool?
It's a good question. Let's turn our attention to the next test match. It is in our spiritual home and our home for when we were younger in Adelaide. The best place to watch cricket. You've got the Adelaide Oval as your background there, Prasanna, for all of those of you watching on YouTube. The last time India and Australia played at Adelaide Oval, it was a famous game for all the wrong reasons for the Indian fan. The team got bowled out for 36. When you look at that batting lineup from that game in 2020, there's only 3 people in this squad that's left over. There's Virat Kohli, Jasprit Bumrah, and Ravi Ashwin, who might not play in this next test match in Adelaide. Prasanna, what do you think will be the lineup for the two teams between for India and Australia in Adelaide in a week's time?
In a week's time? Good question. A week is a long time in cricket and politics, really. But I reckon Ashwin's going to make a entry back into the team. Adelaide is a lovely hunting ground for him. Adelaide's a great pitch, definitely will turn. So one spinner is more than enough. Does that mean Sundar goes? Potentially. If Shami is fit, he's been bowling great in the Ranji Trophy in India. So if Shami is fit and makes the trip, it could very well mean Siraj has to sit out. Apart from that, I don't see any changes in the batting lineup. Of course, Rohit Sharma comes in which case Gill might be the one to sit out. And maybe Jaiswal gets pushed down to 3. And in that case, imagine Jaiswal coming at 3 and making runs. From the Australian team, geez, they can't seem to buy a run. And Adelaide's a very cheap place these days compared to Sydney and Melbourne, so maybe they'll have better luck buying runs there. I don't know who comes in. Definitely, they need to bolster up their bowling, and that's definitely the case. I don't think they're going to tinker much with the batting, and neither should they, because there really isn't much you can do. You can't drop McSweeney on one test, and Marnus Labuschagne, I think, is probably Adelaide or maybe Brisbane might be his last chance. So that's where I think of Adelaide's predictions, really.
Yeah, I think the Prime Minister's 11 game that's starting on the 30th of November will give us some ideas and clues as to what both camps are thinking and what players will front up for those games and what players will get either a chance to bat or bowl. Padikkal will probably drop out. I think you mentioned Gill, but I'm sure you meant Devdutt Padikkal.
Sorry, yes, my bad, yes.
And Dhruv Jurel was the other player in there who may make way if Shubman Gill is fit with his thumb, although I find it hard to believe someone can recover from a fractured thumb within a couple of weeks. Of course, you can do all kinds of things with strapping and taping and things, but good enough to play Test cricket, I'm not sure. I think Shubman probably won't be ready until Boxing Day is my gut feel, but the miracles of modern medicine, we will see. Prasanna, we might just wrap up the show here, but there is one final segment that I ask all my fans and guests, which is the sense from over the fence. And that's you as a cricket fan, Prasanna. If you could have any words of wisdom that you would throw over the fence, whether it's to a player, a fan, or an administrator, what would you say?
2 things there, Sunny. Before I just leave, I just wanted to talk about Adelaide Oval. It's our earlier home. The best memory I have of Adelaide Oval is the 2003 India versus Australia Test match. Rahul Dravid batting and winning. It's one of my first memories of cricket. You were there. A lot of our friends were there. We were just amazed at that. And as a sense, it kind of restarted our love for cricket and the belief that India could win in Australia, could win a series in Australia. To your second question, what would I say in advice? Look, I think the advice to administrators, 1, Test cricket needs to be preserved. This is what statistics are all about. We talk about Yashasvi Jaiswal's 160 against a bowling attack. We talk about Virat Kohli's 100 and then the declaration. We talk about India winning by 295 runs. We don't talk about Sunrisers Hyderabad beating someone or Royal Challengers Bangalore beating anyone. We can't talk about that because they can't beat anyone to save their skins. I'm sorry about that, Sunny.
All right.
Isala, is it?
That's it, Isala.
So Test cricket has to be given primacy. And to that extent, Cricket Australia, you cannot be holding a big bash league that, to be honest, is probably a tier 2 or a tier 3 league, and stopping Sheffield cricket. It's not good for your game. It's not good for Test cricket because, let's face it, Australia is still a fundamentally competitive team. I joke what I said about that before, but Australia is still a fundamentally competitive cricket team. And you need to preserve that because for future generations, we're going to talk about the statistics of Tests. We're going to talk about where were you when this declaration was made, or where were you when this person played that second innings, not where were you when this power play was done at this 2020 international. I mean, it just still doesn't happen. So yeah, that's what I urge administrators to do. And even though I'm wearing an India one-day shirt, it's still, Test cricket is the pinnacle for us, pinnacle for me. I'll wake up at 5 a.m. and watch it if needed.
Yeah, absolutely. Keeping Test cricket alive is a great message to send across to the administrators. Prasanna, from the Common Fan podcast, everyone jump onto their YouTube channel as well. Give them a subscribe, watch their shows. Thank you so much for joining us, Prasanna. I've really enjoyed having you on the show and having a chat as a wrap-up of the Perth Test match.
Thank you very, very much, Sunny. Look, I've been following your cricket career ever since you were a child. You were a fantastic leg spinner, and it's amazing to see how your passion for cricket has continued. Thank you very, very much for having me onto your show. It's a privilege, as I said before, and I hope the Common Fan and the Midwicket podcast can have a match up very soon. So,
that's great. And for all of you at home, that's another episode of the Midwicket podcast. Please do also subscribe to our show on YouTube. Press the follow button on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Have a great week. A week certainly is a long time in cricket, and can't wait to join you again next week for another chat about the Adelaide Test.